Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started here. I'm sure there'll be some folks joining us as we go through this. I'm Alex Counts. I'm the director of the India Philanthropy Alliance, a 4.5-year-old coalition of 15 of the largest and most kind of long tenured and, in our view, effective organizations raising money and talent here in the US to advance the humanitarian and development agenda in India. The mission of IPA, in short, is to enhance collaboration among organizations working to advance the development agenda in India. And one of our, if you want to learn more, you can go to our website, indiaphilanthropyalliance.org. And one of our various programs we're most excited about, and was kind of a theme of last year, was effectively engaging youth and young professionals. And that will be the topic of this paper and this webinar, and it will be led by 4 of the 9 authors of a paper that we published earlier, very early this year in January. It was kind of a holdover from our work in 2021. And I want to thank all 9 authors and the 4 of them who are going to be presenting today. They are Maher Adani, who's a youth development contributor for IPA. He also works as a blogger for American India Foundation. He's a student at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Julia Clark, who is a mathematics teacher in Washington for Teach for America, and has been an intern with IPA. Sachin Zindal, who hopefully is joined by now, is a member of the board of Akanksha Education Fund and a partner at Tower Research Capital. And Vipin Shri, who's a director of growth with Amplify Life Insurance. He's long been involved with American India Foundation as a fellow and as a young professionals chapter lead, and is also involved with the Akanksha Young Professionals Program in New York. Now we have I'm going to turn it over to these 4 young leaders in a second, but basically we have 3 types of gatherings with IPA. One that we're going to be doing today is what I call an internal town hall, where we talk about an issue of interest to our members, and all staff, volunteer, and board members of our members in India and the US are invited. The timing for this isn't so good for the ones in India. So it's not open to the public, but it's open to anyone who's a stakeholder in our members on topics of interest. I should say we did have one webinar of this type on youth led by the Segal Foundation. They have a very robust program back in March of last year, and this is kind of the bookend, the part 2 of that. We also have our business meetings where we have our leaders, our member representatives get together every month and every 6 to 12 months in person for a retreat. And that's just closed to those member representatives. Very great bonding and strategizing time. And then we have an open webinar series that we've just begun, Critical Dialogues webinar series. And we'll be continuing that this year after a successful launch last December. And occasionally we also have working groups that come up among people with a specialized expertise within our members, and those go on for as long as they're meant to. Now, we didn't give any direction to our young people who are going to lead this program, except that we ask that they make it relevant for people who've studied our white paper on youth engagement carefully, those who may have just skimmed it, and those who may not have read it at all, so that they can help the organizations involved, represented here, apply some of the best ideas in that paper and become more effective in engaging youth and young professionals. As I said at the outset, many people asked that we tape this because they couldn't join us at this time of day, and we're doing that. I hope that's okay with everyone. And with that, let me turn it over to Julia, Maher, Vipin, and Sachin for what I hope will be an exciting 55 minutes or so together. Over to you all.
Thanks, Alex, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here this morning or afternoon or wherever it is where you are. As Alex mentioned, I'm an intern with IPA, and I was introduced to IPA and to really this whole world of nonprofits through Alex, who, if you didn't know, was a college professor of mine at the University of Maryland. And I've been working with IPA for almost a full year, specifically with things like the essay competition and some of our other youth engagement programs. So to get us started today, we want to open it up to our youth leaders to share how they were introduced to nonprofit involvement, and specifically to their work with IPA and its members.
Um, my name is Maher. Thank you, Julia. My name is Maher, and I am an IPA intern and youth contributor. And I got involved with IPA when I was in high school. I submitted to the youth engagement essay competition, the first one that IPA ever held, and I won in the high school category. And then through that, I came into yeah. It was a really great experience. I have nothing but positive things to say about it. And through that, I came into contact with Mr. Counts and IPA as a whole, and I didn't even know that there was a whole sector of Indian philanthropy out there. So when I won the competition, I got to know more about what was going on in the space, and so I told Mr. Counts, if you need anything, like if you have any work that that's left over, I can do it, or I can just shadow you. I just want to see what it's like. That was around, I think, that was in like May, June, July, like summer of 2020, and since then I've grown a little bit more involved. I help run IPA social media channels. Um, I meet Mr. Counts. I consult on affairs of youth engagement, how to grow our youth base, and stuff like that. And that's how I was introduced to IPA.
Thank you, Mahe. Hi, I'm Sachin. I have been associated with Akanksha for more than 4 years now. I first got acquainted with Akanksha, I think, in 2017 when we were doing a team event. We did a Ragnar a relay run event with a team of a few people, and we asked other members who were not participating in the run to sort of do a fundraiser, and we collected some amount doing that. And I had heard about Akanksha from my friends and friends of friends, so I approached Akanksha and said like. We wanted to contribute towards this cause, and that was my first interaction with the people at Akanksha. And since then I think it has gone deeper and deeper, and more recently last year I joined the board, and I have been contributing in whatever way I can.
Thanks, Sachin. My name is Vipin. As Alex said, I've been engaged with AIF for a pretty long time, and most recently, I would say over the past 2 or 3 years, with the Akanksha Education Fund. My involvement really stemmed from my experience growing up as a first-gen American in a not so diverse neighborhood in Connecticut, and then getting to college and really seeing this entire Desi culture that I really didn't take part in as a young person. So I really got involved on the nonprofit charity side of things there. And then once I graduated, moved to New York, I realized that itch to give back was still pretty strong. So that's where I found AIF, Young Professionals. And it was a great way for me to not just meet like-minded people, but a way to give back. And then that itch turned into a whole larger situation where I not only was a chapter lead for the American India Foundation New York for 2 years, and then I said, does this experience translate to on the ground experience in India? So I became a now what's known as the Banyan Tree Fellow in India for a year, and then came back. And AIF has had the Young Professionals program for a long time, longer than my tenure there. So I really wanted to start something off the ground, or help start something off the ground. So me and another former Banyan Tree Fellow, Kishore, were tapped in for the Akanksha Education Fund to really build the YP program there from the ground up. So that's my overall involvement. Julia?
Thanks. Yeah, so wide array of diverse backgrounds, but for our next question, we'd like to invite people to share what has been the most meaningful part of your experience so far. So whoever wants to can jump right in.
I think the most meaningful part of my experience so far has just been the fact that I've been witness like I said before, I was not aware that any of these organizations existed like at all right before I became aware of the essay competition. And so realizing that there was such a dedicated space towards Indian philanthropy and also Indian American philanthropy is also it was something I really appreciated and something I thought was very cool, especially because yeah, I'm first gen, so I grew up here, and I my experience is a little bit different. I have a lot of Indian Americans in my hometown, but it's not exactly the same as growing up in India or even being aware of like the news there or what's going on or like just kind of the pulse. So I feel like being a part of this experience has brought me closer to that and has made me more aware of, I think, the general state of things and what I can do to help in a more direct and tangible way.
Thank you, Mahe. For me, I think education has always been very close to my heart. And I think what I've experienced in my personal life as well, that education is not about just language or numbers or science. I think it's a lot more about like values and character that you learn as you get educated. And when I got associated with Akanksha and throughout my experience, I've seen that Akanksha puts a lot of emphasis on that. And we see that in our alumni, which is just amazing to see. Like I think the kind of people come out of Akanksha, not just in terms of their careers, but also in terms of how they think about the world, how they what they want to accomplish. I think that's very very meaningful for me personally.
Thanks, Sachin. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think outside of meeting some of the most amazing people here in New York and abroad in India, as well as all across the world, the most meaningful part of my experience so far is really seeing uh, how the skill set of the everyday young professional transitions into meaningful work outside of the office. And so being able to use all the skills that I learned in a corporate setting and being able to apply that in not just a nonprofit or young professional setting here in New York, but be able to use that on the ground in India, it just really opened up my eyes to the fact that you don't need to be specialized in nonprofit work as a young professional to really make an impact. I think it just, you just have to engage with young professionals in the right way, and their skill sets really translate well into the kind of work that all of your organizations want to do, both on the ground and here in the US. Back to you, Julia.
Yeah, I really agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that, especially for me, my engagement with IPA has been a way to channel a lot of the idealism that I think is fairly common in youth and expand my worldview and get really a practical idea of what it means to give back and contribute to development causes. So next, what strengths do y'all think that young people can really bring to an organization? Why does this matter at all?
No, you
Sure. Yeah, I'll touch back on exactly what I talked about earlier. It's I think the biggest strengths that young people and youth really bring to any organization is growth mindset and an innovation mindset, right? Where I think all of us can agree that we like to see things change quickly and move quickly, and we just tend to add that little bit of pressure to get things done to these organizations that and try new things. I think the lack of fearlessness to try new things is what's really helped all the young professional organizations that I've been a part of really succeed. It's curiosity. I think one quality that everyone I've seen share at any of these organizations is curiosity, right? They're really interested in what's happening on the ground in India. They want to get more involved. They want to tap into their networks and skill sets here and how they can be helpful for the initiatives on the ground.
I completely agree that it was partially what I was gonna say, I think curiosity is a big part of it. I also think it's curiosity combined with a willingness to break away from tradition and to not necessarily stick to how things have been done the usual way. I feel like I'm trying to find the best way to word this, but I feel like a lot of youth are equipped with an understanding, like an innate understanding of like tools of today, like social media and technology and stuff like that. Just from growing up with it, they have a different understanding, a different cultural context of how it's used in society. Um, so I think that consciousness, when combined with like the curiosity and empathy for the cause, whether it's stuff like this, like Indian American philanthropy, or anything else, domestic or worldwide, I think it can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, completely agree. And along with the points Vipin and Maher already mentioned, I would say that I think the energy and enthusiasm youth brings to an organization can be quite contagious. It could actually uh, just energize the whole room towards a passion, towards a cause, or towards a mission that the organization is going towards. And also, I think just the network or the word they can spread, even if they are directly not able to contribute financially or anything. I think the word they can spread within their friend circles, within their organizations, the work they can do to organize events, all of that could be very, very important to an organization's success, especially in mixed nonprofit world. Back to you, Julia. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything said so far. Again, and I'd add to that, people bring a lot of growth potential. I really resonated with the idea in the paper of diamonds in the rough, because I feel that I was a bit of a diamond in the rough and maybe still am smoothing out some of those edges. But I think there's a lot of ability to develop youth into really powerful advocates, and especially through things like young professionals programs, internships, and things like that. Build skills that you would like to see in your organization in someone who brings the energy and enthusiasm to jump in head first.
Julia,
So,
sorry, I wanted to add just one more point is time, right? One of the biggest strengths of young professionals is time. And so if you get young professionals and youth engaged early on, you're really building a pipeline of brand advocates for the rest of their lives. So not only are they starting at a young age and really energized, but once these people go on to have really great, amazing careers, they're going to bring that same energy and hopefully a larger set of resources to the initiatives later on.
Julie, we're starting to get a couple of questions in the chat, or at least one, just so you're aware of that.
okay, yeah, so we do have some time built in just a bit for audience questions, and to share some of your experiences at your own organizations with youth engagement. But first, I want to ask just a few more questions to our youth leaders. So next up, what do you see organizations most frequently get wrong about engaging youth? What are the top mistakes?
Maybe I can go first. I think the biggest thing to me is that there is a lot of focus on how to engage youth, but there is a lot less focus on why to engage youth in an organization. Like I think the first thing an organization should do is to understand like we talked about few of the strengths youth brings, but I think each organization is different, and for each organization, the values youth can bring could be very different. So I think each organization should probably spend enough time to understand why first before they jump into how.
I think I completely agree. Um, I think so many organizations, out of good intentions, but they're so preoccupied like how do we get engagement? How do we place our advertisements where they're looking? Blah, blah, blah. And they're not thinking of the innate things that will like connect someone who's younger to your organization's mission. I also think young people are, again, going back to kind of like the media consciousness, they're very good at figuring out when things feel a little bit wrong, when maybe not bad intentions, but when you don't necessarily want them for their ideas and input, when they're just wanted for a demographic factor or something. I think youth are very, very good at sensing that, and it's something that I'm not sure a lot of people realize just how important it is. for the materials and the way that you engage with youth to really be resonant and not just kind of check off all the boxes.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, and I look at nonprofit work very similarly from a business mindset, and you see this phenomenon of these older companies hiring these younger like Gen Z folks and then trying to put them in boxes of like Gen Y or millennial responsibilities and rules and structures. And I think when you do that, you stifle the creativity and you stifle the enthusiasm that young professionals bring. So really, like, be structured and have uh, a good sense of what needs to get done from a young professionals organization, but really have an open mindset and don't use, as Meher said earlier, like traditions and things that have just worked all the time in the past. That can't be the same set of rules and goals and structures that apply to young professionals. So I think that's really the biggest flaw or fatal flaw that organizations make, is they want the energy and the innovation that young professionals and youth bring, but they want it in a very narrow lens, and that's just, you have to have a compromise at some point.
I think that's a great point. And I really think that taps on like that theme of autonomy. And with any sort of youth engagement, you're going to get individual people. And so I think that it's good to avoid, stereotyping like, oh, they're a young person, so they're going to be good at social media or this and this and this, and let them bring their skills to you and harness what you can at that, but giving them the freedom to contribute in an innovative and meaningful way. So from your personal experiences, what has made you feel that you belong and are appreciated by an organization that you're involved with?
I can take this. So having been a part of both AIF and Akanksha, I mean, now totaling 7 years, which makes me feel like I aged out of this webinar title completely. I believe the greatest gift that these organizations gave me, outside of the ability to network with really great young professionals and peers, was just bringing us into the conversations early on what the goals are for the organization, and making me really feel like, okay, like, here are the goals. We know you guys can handle this. Here are the responsibilities. Here are the goals. Well, they brought my team in early enough, and they gave me a strong sense of autonomy to get things done with a certain structure, but really the freedom to like try anything. And I would say, because of that, both organizations, I'm not taking the credit for this, but like, because of young professionals that they brought on, you've seen their numbers grow, both in a fundraising standpoint. You've seen their numbers grow both from a community engagement standpoint. So really, the greatest gift isn't just like giving us networking opportunities with maybe for better careers, but really bringing us in and making us feel like we're part of the team. We're part of the experts, that we're in the same line. We're peers. We're not a tool to use, but we're a set of peers that are bringing in a completely different new experience and ideas to the table. Thanks, Alex. I'm will not be afraid to brag later on.
I think I have a lot less experience being considerably younger than Vibin, but the general tenets are still there. I really feel appreciated when, I think it's just kind of words of affirmation, just like you belong in this organization, even though it's much older than you, and it may have a mission that you feel that dwarfs you. You are like an important part of our plan here, and that kind of thing. I think that support that Mr. Counts and Peg especially have been so good in giving me as I worked with this team this year, and also like when I initially got involved with IPA. it was just like you have a seat in the table and you have a say of sorts. Um, and I think that's more beneficial because then whoever the young professional is more motivated because they feel that they really do have a stock in the outcome and a say in what's going on.
Totally agree with all the points Vipin and Mahir mentioned. I think my experience has been like pretty much the same. I think Akanksha has been very, very welcoming of the ideas, of the thoughts, any sort of questions, no matter how basic or how naive they are. They have been like very supportive of like say answering that questions and like making sure that we are getting through like all the points that have been brought to the table by anybody in the room, no matter how young they are. So I definitely appreciate that quite a bit. I think uh, yeah,
That's a great point. And I think I felt really like accepted and like I belonged when I was given the freedom to ask questions, especially as someone who is not Indian American. When I'm in a place where I can be curious and ask questions and not feel like I'm being like judged or shamed for it, that has made me feel really like valued and like the IPA or any organization is like willing to invest in me and in young people in general, which I feel is important. So going off of that, was there ever a time for any of you where you felt like your engagement was low? And why did it waver and what ultimately drew you back in?
I think occasionally the things that would take me out of my engagement or would make me be a little bit disillusioned is that and maybe this sounds silly, but it was just like weird like IPA NIF and all of the member organizations have not necessarily like huge but like very lofty expectations and like just big problems that they're dealing with, you know, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of their work was focused on um things relating to aid in India and how to help people and to spread awareness and so many things. And then in those moments, I was just like, I am 19 years old and I am in a dorm room, and I run the social media. I'm not sure exactly if I am contributing, how I can contribute, if this is, if I, am I doing anything to help them? I think moments like that, I just felt kind of disillusioned where I was just like, am I where do I stand, you know? But at the same time, like I went before, I think those words of affirmation from the team, and also just becoming more and more absorbed in the work, um, it really is kind of like a movement from the ground up, like from the highest position to people who just are posting on social media and spreading awareness. I think it's all important, which is not necessarily something I held true initially, but something I came to feel more comfortable in my position about it.
I think my engagement with Akanksha, if any time like it has been low, it is mainly because of my own sort of time constraints, not because of the organization itself. But I feel like I think that could be somewhat relevant for other young professionals as well. I think just depending upon how and where they are in their careers and their lives, it could be hard for them to like give plenty of time to the organizations and especially on weekdays. So I think it might be worth sort of keeping that in mind, like how you can plan your events, how you can plan your sort of your any interactions, like on time that could work better for you as compared to everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. I think from what I've seen, when I was chapter lead, there were waves in where the whole entire group's engagement was low. And that was primarily due to consistency in the vision from the rest of the parent organization, right? So if early on we are told, hey, the young professionals group is in charge or is responsible for community engagement with people of this certain age group and this certain demographic, and we'd like for you to fundraise this amount, and we're on that path and we're doing pretty well, and then out of nowhere we get these very lofty fundraising goals, or saying like everyone needs to be able to get 10 people to attend the gala or attend $100 or more, or fundraise $100 or more. I think that like inconsistency really really messes with people, because they've had their eye on the prize since the start. And when those like top down, I guess, messages come in or goals come in and derail us from the journey that we were on based on the vision that was set out early on, I think that tends to lower people's engagement quite a bit. So like I would say young professionals and the youth groups are looking at the parent organizations to set consistent vision. And once you set that vision, like you should really help guide the young professionals and youth groups to get there, but try not to derail from that vision too much, because most of these folks are volunteers and doing it on top of their full-time jobs. So as Sachin said, like going from consistent work every week and then all of a sudden having a bombardment of new goals set in place can really throw some folks off.
And to add to that, I think like another thing, at least I experienced more recently, was that like there could be not necessarily like only relevant for youth, but probably for the whole organization, that there could be better follow-ups of, like, say, some meetings, some discussions, let's say some board retreats we have, and then we discuss on an agenda, and we like what happens to that agenda and how we follow up on that. That could be probably better managed than just to, because I think engagement level is highest after such a discussion, after such a meeting, and you're already in that mindset. And then if you let it cool down for weeks, I think then you're sort of wasting that energy, wasting that enthusiasm that was built out in the meeting.
I think that's a great point. And I'd also like to touch on in this the being cause-centric. And this was something that I think Maher sort of mentioned, but when you're feeling like disillusioned, and for me, I had a time when I sort of was distanced from IPA. I was starting my first full-time job after graduation and felt very like busy and overwhelmed. And I sort of was having conversations with myself that I was being stretched too thin. But after a few months reflecting on it, I came to realize that working towards a mission that I believed in and centering around the cause and executing a clear vision was in fact something that filled my cup up rather than drained me. And I think that change in my like frame of mind really drew me back in and made me like almost desperate to like start doing some work again and like roll up my sleeves. So I think that's really important, that keeping like that goal and the reasoning central to any youth engagement program can keep harness energy and pull people back even when they're like back in it, even when they're feeling kind of stressed or overwhelmed. So along a similar vein, what challenges have you all encountered as a young person involved in nonprofits?
I think this goes hand in hand with how I felt about the last question, which is I think just disillusionment, being like, do I have a place here? Not that IP ever did anything to make me feel like that. I think they've always been very kind and supportive. Just like me being like, I'm new to the space. How do I best contribute? Can I best contribute? And also just dealing with like, I guess like the paperwork of it all, because I guess being so young, I'm used to things just like going really quickly. And then I think for grants and like decisions and votes and I think board affairs and stuff, like just all this just kind of like um it's just a world I'm not familiar with. So sometimes I'm just like, this is very good work that we're doing, but it's going kind of slow. We have to wait for everything to happen. It can give me a little bit of impatience, but I guess that just might be my personality, my demeanor. And at the end of the day, it's very worth it. It just takes me a little bit to get used to.
Yeah, I'll say that the two biggest challenges that I faced all throughout were I think agility is the big one, right? Like young people bring a lot of energy and want to change things quickly. And I know while that's not always possible, coming into a highly matrix organization, for instance, and trying to get something going or have something be approved and ready to go takes a bit of time. And I think so like that slowdown of decision making tends to be a pretty big challenge, especially when you have a lot of highly engaged, energetic young professionals who are like, we're going to do all of this year, and then the decision making is kind of slow, and we're able to do maybe a fraction of what we set out to do. So that would definitely be the biggest challenge I face. And then the other challenge would be just overall resources, right? Like it's great if you have internal resources like a graphic designer and a website developer at the organization that can help the young professionals get these campaigns off the ground. But if you don't have that, and the young professionals are trying to do it their own way and are met with some sort of pushback or friction due to budget or, again, slow decision making, I think it really slows down the overall impact of young professionals and youth.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest challenge has been like just clarity of the needs of the organization in India, and like what is the exact strategy that we are pursuing for next 2 years, 3 years, and how much can we support? Like, what are our funding goals corresponding to that strategy the Indian organization is following, and what's the sort of expectation along FCRA, and like, so all these questions, so that we can actually plan our fundraising plan here in the US according to that. Like, how many initiatives should we go for? Should we invest in like some resources that could pay off in the long run, or should we just keep yeah, I mean, like, all these questions are much better answered once you have clarity on like what are your funding needs 3 years down the road.
Yeah, a theme I noticed throughout this is that like the having clarity and sort of like structures for decision making, resources and things like that. And I think that embedding that sort of like external structure and framework into a youth engagement program is important, even though we are advocating for, giving young people autonomy, still having that sort of like base scaffold that is connecting them to the organization as a whole, I think is really, really important. And I see Manu asked a question in the chat, what can we do to make it go faster? And while we are going to save most of our questions for the end, I think this is a good one for us to jump on now. So any ideas, what can organizations do to smooth out some of these challenges, make things move a little faster, harness energy?
I think one of the points in the white paper that really resonated with me is like have control as a parent organization, put structure in the places that you have to put structure in, but then after that, remove any friction for decision making for the young professionals and youth groups, right? You allowed these people into your organization. You obviously trust that they can do the work that you want them to do. So removing all barriers for their own decision making outside of the structures that need to be in place. For instance, like there's certain brand guidelines that they have to follow. There's certain language that they should stick to. Outside of that, or a certain budget that they need to stick to. Outside of that, there should be autonomy for these youth and young professional groups to make decisions quickly and move quickly.
I agree. I don't know. I feel like that summed up a lot of my feelings as well. At some point, it's unavoidable. You know what I was talking about. I think it stemmed more from my impatience as a young person than maybe some deep-seated problems with like administration of like organizations. I think to make good decisions, good rational decisions, you have to take some time to consider it. But as for stuff like bureaucracy, and I think just having more systems in place to address many kinds of problems as opposed to maybe being blindsided by something you didn't expect. And I know this feels vague, but I think just taking into consideration and maybe making some more protocols to let things pass down the chain of command more smoothly as opposed to it stopping at every level to be assessed would be a better approach.
I think organizations could do probably better by bringing youth and experienced people together, so that we can say combine energy and experience. Like if it's very hard for somebody to evaluate whether they are being impatient or the other or the overall organization is being slow. So if there can be a better association with, say, whether buddy system or mentor system in the organization, so that people can explain to you that this is why we don't want to act fast on this, this is why the decisions are being taken slow, so that we can actually have a better combination of energy and experience in the organization.
And I'll add one more thing. This is really where the use of technology can help, right? I think there's an opportunity to use the latest and greatest tools here to really speed up communication, to speed up decision making, project management. These are all things that, you know, if a young professional is coming to you and saying, hey, like, we use this at work and this is a product that really speeds things up, it's probably a good thing to take a serious hard look at and see if it can be implemented in your organization too. Because chances are, if a giant corporate organization is using it to speed up certain things, the same effect could happen at your level as well.
And for our last question, if you were to design the perfect program to attract young people like you, what would it look like?
I can take this on. This is from my most recent experience with the Akanksha Education Fund. I think they did a really good job of allowing us to be highly autonomous. So we started Akanksha Education Fund, like it was just a, hey, we need young professionals. We'd love to see their impact. How would you do it? And they really put the ball in our court and said, come up with a few ideas, come up with a few programs. One of the key distinctions between Akanksha and other young professional programs that I've seen is that it's a multifaceted approach to where young professionals can have an impact, right? You can have a set impact on the fundraising side. You can literally get money from your friends and family, and you know that money is going to a really good cause on the ground in India. You could be part of community building here in New York. So holding events, holding fundraising events, speaker series, etc., right here in New York to really build engagement with young professionals. And then there's this one really interesting piece, which is the tangible ability to help the beneficiaries of Akanksha, which is through the mentorship program. So as a young professional, if I'm coming to an organization and I have all these three very distinct ways to help out, I get to pick and choose where I fit in best, where I can give most of my time to. And I think that's really the perfect setting for a young professional. They can come in and they can do as little work that they probably have the time for on the fundraising side, or they can really engage with the cause on the ground by being a mentor to a student here in the United States. So there's that both intangible experience as well as that tangible experience. And I think that's really how I would build a new YP program, is to provide all those facets.
I like two main points that come to my mind in, like, say, increasing youth engagement in any organization. Number one, I think, is really having a proper ROI metric defined. Like, how do you measure return of your organization? And it probably circles back to my original point. Like, the organization should really understand, like, why do we want youth engagement, and build, like, howsoever you define your success as an organization, build that why into a return metric, so that whenever you are investing into any program, that you can actually see, like, how it's going to give any return back to you, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, I don't know. But I think at least having some metrics, so that it's relatively easier to convince the team, the board, that you do want to invest in this program, which may not show a payoff right away, right? So having, like, a very clear or like more clarity on the return measurement, like on an ROI metric, that could be helpful. And second is just defining events that could be more youth centric, that could be more course centric rather than. And I think that's just generally true for a lot of organizations in New York, that the galas are just the primary source of, like, spreading the word about our organization, which I think, at least in my experience, doesn't resonate very well with the youth. And there could be better forms of events, like whether they are sports events or whether they are like online events, but they could be like low cost events that could be actually more appealing, and that could be more fun. So like maybe doing run events or something like that. I think that could be probably more appealing, and that could engage youth more than the gala events.
I agree. I was like mulling over my answer to this question because I have a lot less, I guess, experience to draw from. But I guess in terms of the perfect program, I completely agree with like less focus on like I guess the gala and like the showier fundraising events. Not that those aren't necessarily or even nice, but I don't think they're necessarily what resonates with young people. I think a lot of like hands-on work, a strong emphasis on technology, especially, just because that's a tool that I feel like the majority of young people are very comfortable with. Um, I think those are the two most important pillars for like an ideal program that I can think of off the top of my head would be um, attractive to young people.
For someone like me, I was really drawn in the paper to the idea of a blueprint project for some of the reasons that I think have been brought up so far. But the idea of contributing to something that is affecting the mission in some way is really important to me. And I think even if it's not like a primary problem that is being solved, the like a secondary or tertiary problem, some way of supporting that um, through a blueprint project that harnesses specific skills. So I think it's important to like where you go to look for young people or young professionals should depend on what you're hoping to have them do. And I think matching the young people to the necessary skills and projects that they'll be working on is really critical. So for someone like me, that might be something more behind the scenes, looking at like websites or data or things like that. Whereas for other people, that might be like if you like working on like graphics or events. And so I think finding the right person for a problem that you need solved, and then letting them have some autonomy to build out that project would be my ideal. I know Alex a couple times has been like, I have this thing that need or like this deliverable that we need to work on. Like here's the bulleted list of all the things it needs to include. Now go. And then being able to check back in with him like as I'm working to get some feedback on it, I think is also really important and where a lot of those staff mentor relationships can come into play. Yeah, so anything else we want to add on this question?
Yeah, I'll add one final point, which probably doesn't sound great, but I promise you it does reap the benefits. Is young professionals also are in the peak of their careers, and time is really of the essence. So having some self-serving aspect to a program is really important, right? Whether that's networking with people that they strive to be later on in their careers, or networking with peers, or just having some sort of tangible like self-serving takeaway is the way you're going to get larger numbers to be engaging. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a good amount of people who are going to do good things for the nonprofit world just because they have the urge to help. But both unfortunately and fortunately, like you want that self-serving piece to provide bigger numbers, and with those bigger numbers comes the bigger like the network effect.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to start to address some of the questions that we've had so far in the chat, and we'll open it up. I think the collaborative environment that we're in, we know what works for one organization might not work for others, and what works for us might not work for every single young person. So we're going to open it up to talk more about specific questions or anything that people in the audience have to share that might have worked for your organization in the past. So first, looking back up here, how is it possible for young professionals and young people to engage through their companies? So maybe Vipin and Sachin, you can add something to this.
Yeah, I think you have to be very careful asking young professionals to engage through their companies if they're not working for large corporations, right? Most large corporations have a matching program, a donation matching program, and I think that's definitely the way to go. I remember Akanksha asked for all of us to look into our donation matching programs for our companies. We were more than happy to provide that information and set that up. But I think you also don't want to like force that on your young professionals, because some of them might not be working for larger organizations. So for them to go and ask their 40-person startup, hey, can you help out with my very like South Asia focused nonprofit that I want to do, you're asking a lot of the young professional to do that. So I would try to avoid like mandating company run programs. But it's definitely, there's no harm in asking for, hey, do you work for a Fortune 500 company or a large corporation that has a donation matching program? If you do you mind setting up Akanksha or AIF or Segal Foundation or any one of these organizations as your particular charity that you want to donate to? And I think that's totally fine.
Yep, totally agree with Vipin. I think the kind of organizations we are working with, I think there should not be things like mandating any expectations really. If you are able to engage the youth better, I think they will find ways on their own to get their organizations or get their companies associated in whatever way. So I feel like I think the focus should really be to actually just engage them more and more and make sure that they believe in the organization and they have stories to tell to their colleagues, to their HR, to whatever people. And I think if they believe, I think they'll find ways. Like I think last year our company started doing donation matching, and I mean like without even Akanksha asking, like I think some of our people who had been associated with Akanksha, they raised it out that like we should have Akanksha donation matching here. So I think it's just happens much more organically if you are increasing engagement rather than enforcing or mandating people to do that.
Keeping our time in mind, we have a couple more to try to get to. So Sejal asked, how can we use youth or young professionals to provide skills-based volunteering in an organization?
Yeah, so I've thought about this quite a bit. So the one issue is you might want a young professional that comes in and does 5 hours of work that's specific to their profession, whether it's web development or graphic design or marketing or something. The problem with that is for the young professional or the youth, that very much feels like work, right? So they don't want to go from work to do more work. They want to do something that's more that takes their skill set, but really applies it to a greater vision. So the way I would approach that is, instead of a set period of time that a person comes in and volunteers using their skill set, you should have a day or 2 days to work on a specific project. That, like, there's a big project that Akanksha Education Fund is looking to work on. Bring a group of those young professionals with similar skill sets to work on that project. This way they're getting all three of those things that I talked about for the perfect program. One is they're engaging with their own community and peers. They have an opportunity to network with other people in their field, and they're going to solve a very tangible problem. So whether that's, hey, we're looking to build a fundraising website specific to this fundraising campaign, we need help. And that's a set project, there's a set goal. A few people can come in using their specific skill set and make that happen, rather than have it be drawn out over a time period and it'll feel like work. It'll feel a lot less like work.
I think that thinking of it as project-based rather than time-based is really valuable. And I also think with something like skills-based volunteering, if you're willing to, give a little more time and maybe feedback, this might be an area where you could engage with college students. And one of the added benefits that they would be getting out of it is sharpening their skills and even getting something that they could put on their resume, which again, adds to some of that like little self-serving pieces that's going to motivate more youth to engage. All right, so views of having a dedicated budget for youth groups.
Yeah, go ahead,
Like
Sachin.
sports, good or bad. I think like again, like when you say come up with say, a youth budget, you're sort of doing a budget allocation just for the sake of youth and not really associated with the cause or with the objective of the organization. And again, like sort of it, I don't know how much it actually labels youth that you're a special class of the organization rather than being the organization itself. So on the one hand, I definitely appreciate the intention behind this, that because then it actually makes sure that you are allocating enough resources. But I feel like if that can be better routed through the cause or like the mission based budget rather than youth based or people based budget, I think that might be better perceived. That's my view.
Yeah, I'm in somewhat agreement with Sachin. I do think that like just having a budget for the sake of a budget doesn't really help. But if you're going to work with the young professionals and the youth groups to come up with a budget collaboratively, I think that's super helpful, because a part of the problem that I've seen at all the organizations that I've volunteered for is we have this really great idea. We're not really sure if it's affordable or if it's within the budget or not. But if we talked about this early on in the year and set a budget collaboratively, like, hey, we know we want to throw 4 events. We know we want to use this platform, this software to get our word out. This is how much it's likely going to cost, and it's either approved or unapproved. Then obviously that budget will fluctuate throughout the year, but at least we have some sort of a backbone, a financial backbone that we can work off of for the year. And that's really helpful and it goes back to making decisions much faster that way.
All right. So that unfortunately will have to be our last question, but thank you for all of those. And hopefully we'll get to see you at a future event. And I'm going to pass back to Alex to close us out.
Great. I'm going to take a minute or so to make a couple final comments. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for doing a great job. I want to thank all of you for coming and showing interest. And I want to just tell a very brief story that came to my mind as I was listening. I was once involved in an event organized by an Indian organization here in the US, and it was a small dinner with a Nobel laureate. And they, as typical, they invited people who were already big financial donors, people mostly in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And about 8 of them canceled within 36 hours of the event. And so the executive director, quick thinking, invited young people who weren't originally invited and filled up the empty seats. And one of the board members of that organization, a great board member, but he kind of referred to later, he says, there was a lot of quote unquote filler in the room, meaning people who aren't going to make big checks. So why would we have them there? And the executive director said, they aren't filler, they're the future. And so that idea of playing the long game, as was said, I think a couple of times, and I'll just, another story, when Julia was immersed in Teach for America and wasn't available to me for the first time in like 2 years, and it was like a major crisis, I just said, you know what, she'll be back. Don't pressure her, and she did come back. So playing the long game and also giving them autonomy. I received some criticism for not imposing my views of this webinar and just letting the 4 of them go, and including from the young people themselves who ran it, but it turned out great in my mind. Last 2 thoughts. Young people are not a monolith. That's one of the reasons I had a fair amount of age diversity among the 4 panelists, and diversity in terms of what states or even countries they were born in, and what stage of youth they're in, and so forth. So I think that bear that in mind. As an organization, walk before you can run. If you're not that involved in engaging youth, do something, and take one idea in this paper, one idea from this webinar, and apply it. And if you're not sure which one to do, just put it as an agenda item on your next board meeting or staff meeting, saying, what can we do? What one thing can we do as a group that could make us more attractive and get more value and create more value for youth and get more value from the young people affiliated with our organization. So let us know how it goes. Thanks again to the 4 panelists and all of you for joining. And I would look forward to hearing how these ideas play out in your organizations. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I saw a few questions left, so I think the four of us would be more than happy to answer those questions if they came in via email or have a further discussion later on. But thank you, Alex, Julia, Maher, Sachin, for all of this, and for everyone else that joined. Really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.